Lieutenant Kira Vance found the empty ammunition case at 0600, 3 hours before the Western Division sniper competition was scheduled to begin. The foam inserts that should have cradled 200 rounds of carefully selected match-grade ammunition showed only the impression of what had been there. She lifted the case, checking the weight, confirming what her eyes already told her. Someone had taken every round. The range facility's fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the equipment bay. Kira set the case down slowly, her movements deliberate despite the ice forming in her chest. She had triple-checked this case last night, locked it personally, signed a logbook. The competition ammunition represented 6 months of careful selection, each round tested for consistency, each lot number verified for temperature stability. Gone. Footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Kira glanced toward the sound, then back at the empty case. Her mind was already moving through options, calculating timelines, assessing what could be salvaged from this deliberate sabotage. Because that is what this was. Equipment did not walk away on its own from a locked facility on a Marine base. The door opened, and Master Gunnery Sergeant Cordell entered, coffee in hand, his weathered face set in its usual pre-competition scowl. He stopped when he saw her standing over the open case. His eyes dropped to the empty foam, then back to her face. Something shifted in his expression, a careful neutrality settling over his features. "You're going to want to report this," he said. His tone was measured, almost gentle. It suggested he already knew what had happened, and perhaps who was responsible. "Get it documented. We can push your slot to the next competition cycle. No penalty, no questions asked." Kira shook her head. The movement was slight but definitive. "I need access to the ballistics workshop," she said, "and the raw materials locker. Bode, primis, bullets. I will need brass, but I can pull that from the range brass if necessary." Cordell's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Lieutenant," he said, and now his voice carried the weight of 30 years in the Corps. "You are talking about hand-loading 200 rounds of precision ammunition in less than 3 hours. Even if you knew what you were doing, which I am not saying you do not, the likelihood of achieving match-grade consistency is minimal at best." From the doorway behind Cordell, another voice cut in. $20 says she does not even try." Sergeant Marcus Highland leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. $50 says if she does try, she does not make it to the firing line before time expires. Kira recognized Highland. He had been vocal during the pre-competition briefings, questioning whether the competition should be open to female snipers from other branches. His arguments had been couched in concerns about physical standards and unit cohesion, but his eyes had told a different story. They told it now, watching her with satisfaction barely concealed. "Make it 100, another Marine said from behind Highland. Staff Sergeant Shun pushed past him into the equipment bay. 100 says she withdraws within the hour. She is probably already calculating how to spin this, so it does not look like she is quitting." Cordell turned slowly, his jaw tightening. "You two need to be somewhere else," he said. The words came out flat and cold. "Right now. We're just talking," Gunny Highland said. He pushed off the door frame, his smile widening. Friendly wager among colleagues. Nothing wrong with that. He glanced back at Kira. "No offense, Lieutenant. Just being realistic about the situation. Before we dive into what happened next, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed women breaking barriers in spaces where they were not expected. Maybe you have seen sabotage turn into opportunity. Let us know where you are from and whether stories like this resonate in your community." Kira moved past Cordell, past the 2 Marines still blocking the doorway. Neither stepped aside immediately. She stopped, met Highland's eyes directly, and waited. The silence stretched for 3 seconds before he shifted slightly to the left. She walked through without acknowledging the small victory. The ballistics workshop was 2 buildings away across the main parade ground. Early morning light was just beginning to break over the eastern ridgeline, painting the mountains in shades of copper and gold. Kira's boots struck the pavement in steady rhythm. Her mind was already running calculations. 200 rounds. Standard point, .308 Winchester chambering. She would need match bullets, probably 175-grain Sierra Match Kings, if the workshop had them in stock. Powder would be critical, temperature stable, probably Varget if available. Primers would need to be Federal gold medal match or equivalent. Brass could be once fired if she had time to measure and sort for consistency. 3 hours was not enough time to do it properly, but it was enough time to do it well enough. And well enough might be sufficient to prove a point that apparently needed proving. She reached the workshop and found the door locked. Of course it was locked. She pulled out her access card, swiped it through the reader. The light stayed red. She tried again. Still red. Her credentials should have granted her access to all range facilities. Should have. Lieutenant Vance. The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Captain Ortega approaching, keys jangling from his belt. He was the range officer, responsible for competition logistics and safety protocols. His face showed concern, but there was something else underneath it. Doubt, maybe, or resignation. Gunny Cordell called me. Told me what happened to your ammunition. I need access to this workshop, Kira said, and the materials locker. Ortega reached the door, but did not immediately move to unlock it. Lieutenant, he said carefully, I understand the impulse to push through adversity. That is commendable, but hand-loading precision ammunition under time pressure for a competition of this caliber, it is not practical. The margin for error is too high. The safety considerations alone require extensive testing protocols that we simply do not have time to implement. I will test every round, Kira said. Chronograph verification, pressure signs check, the full protocol. I know the procedures. Knowing procedures and executing them flawlessly under pressure are different things. Ortega glanced back toward the equipment bay, where a small crowd was beginning to gather. Word was spreading. Marines were stopping their morning routines, drawn by the spectacle of a female SEAL lieutenant trying to hand-load her way into a competition after apparent sabotage. You have an out here, Ortega continued. A legitimate reason to withdraw. No one could fault you for that. We could document the theft, launch an investigation, get you into the next competition with proper support. Kira held his gaze. Sir, she said quietly, I am not withdrawing. I'm asking for access to the tools and materials I need to compete. If regulations allow you to deny that access, then deny it. But if they do not, then I need you to open that door. Ortega studied her for a long moment. Behind them, the crowd was growing. She could hear voices now, carrying across the morning air. Conversations about what was happening, predictions about how this would play out, the rising buzz of a community witnessing something outside the normal routine. Captain Ortega pulled the keys from his belt and selected one. He inserted it into the workshop door lock. As he turned it, he spoke without looking at her. You have until on and 100 to complete your ammunition preparation and safety testing. That gives you 2 hours and 45 minutes. If you miss that window, your competition slot will be forfeited. Understood? Understood, sir. The lock clicked open. Ortega pushed the door inward and stepped aside. The workshop stretched before her, workbenches lined with reloading presses, shelving units holding components, the precise order of a space dedicated to the careful craft of ballistics. Kira stepped inside. Behind her, she heard Ortega speaking to the growing crowd, telling them to clear the area, to return to their preparation routines. But she also heard the footsteps that did not leave, the Marines who were staying to watch, to witness what they clearly expected to be a failure captured in real time. She moved to the materials locker and began pulling what she needed. Powder, brimes, bullets, brass, calipers and scales, and the precise instruments of measurement that would determine whether the next 3 hours would end in vindication or exactly the kind of failure that Highland and Shun and probably dozens of others were betting on. The digital scale read 0.000 grains. Kira tapped the calibration weight onto the pan and watched the numbers climb to exactly 50 grains. Satisfied, she removed the weight and reached for the powder container. Varget, as she had hoped. Temperature stable, consistent burn rate, the gold standard for precision .308 loads. She had worked with it extensively during her advanced marksmanship training at Fort Benning, back when the other students had assumed she was there as some kind of diversity checkbox rather than because she had outscored 200 male candidates on the qualification course. The workshop door opened behind her. She did not turn, keeping her attention on the scale as she carefully trickled powder into the pan. 42.5 grains. That was the load she needed. Not 42.4, not 42.6. Precision ammunition required precision in every step, and there were no shortcuts available when you were trying to achieve match-grade consistency in a fraction of the normal development time. She thinks she can load match-grade ammo in a few hours? The voice belonged to Staff Sergeant Chun. Kira recognized the tone from earlier, that particular blend of skepticism and condescension. Took me 3 years to perfect my loads for this competition. 3 years of testing, temperature mapping, velocity ladders. And she's going to do it in one morning? Another voice responded, deeper, more measured. That is Master Gunnery, Sergeant Holland. He trains all the division marksmanship instructors. Holland had a reputation for being fair but exacting, a perfectionist who had forgotten more about ballistics than most shooters would ever learn. Let her work, Chun. We will see what we will see. Kira reached the target weight and used the trickler to add the final few granules of powder. 42.5 exactly. She carefully transferred the charge case to the loading block and began the process again. Zero the scale. Measure the powder. Verify the weight. Transfer to case. Repeat. 200 times. In 2 hours and 38 minutes. The workbench she had chosen faced the window overlooking the main range complex. She could see the firing line where the competition would take place, the white target frames at 600 meters, 800, 1,000, 1,200. Beyond them, the desert stretched toward mountains that shimmered in the rising heat. Somewhere out there, at 1,400 meters, the final targets would be placed. That was where ammunition quality mattered most, where even slight variations in velocity or bullet concentricity would translate into misses measured in feet rather than inches. How long you been reloading, Lieutenant? Holland's question came from directly behind her now, close enough that she could hear the slight wheeze in his breathing, the decades of desert dust and powder smoke that had settled into his lungs. For years, Gunny, she said. She did not stop working as she spoke. Another case charged, another precise measurement verified. Since I started sniper training with the teams, had an instructor who believed we should understand our ammunition from the ground up, not just trust what came in the factory box. For years, Holland made a sound that might have been approval or might have been doubt. His boots scraped against the concrete floor as he moved around to where he could see her set up more clearly. You running match bullets? Sierra Match King, 175 grain. Kira nodded toward the bullet box on her left. Lot number tested for consistency. Same lot I was going to use before my ammunition disappeared. Pretty miss. Federal gold medal match. Large rifle. Also from a tested lot. Holland picked up one of the completed rounds from the loading block, holding it up to the light, examining the bullet seating depth, the crimp, the overall length. His fingers were thick and scarred from decades of weapons handling, but they moved with surprising delicacy as he rotated the cartridge. You know your brass prep, he said. It was not quite a question. Full-length resize, neck turned for consistency, flash holes deburred, primer pockets uniformed. Kira continued working as she spoke, sorted by weight and case capacity. The range brass bin had enough once-fired federal cases to give me a good selection. Holland set the round back in the loading block with more care than Chun had shown for anything in his entire approach to this situation. Most shooters never bother with half of that, he said. They buy factory match ammo and assume that is good enough. You're doing full competition prep on range brass in less than 3 hours. Behind Holland, Chun shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The movement carried audible skepticism. Yeah, but doing it fast and doing it right are two different things, he said. Velocity consistency is going to be all over the place. She will be lucky to hit paper at 1,000 meters, much less compete for a respectable finish. Kira finished another round and set it carefully into the block. The rows were growing, 20 completed now, 180 remaining. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but never rushed. Every movement was deliberate, Every measurement verified. Speed without precision was worthless. Precision without speed would leave her standing in this workshop when the competition began without her. The door opened again. More footsteps, more voices joining the growing audience. Word had spread through the facility now. Marines preparing for the competition were taking detours past the workshop, finding reasons to stop by, to witness what most of them clearly expected to be an instructive failure. Someone had opened the window blinds fully, and Kira could see faces pressed against the glass. Spectators to a disaster in progress. Captain Ortega appeared in her peripheral vision, moving to stand beside Holland. The range officer carried a clipboard and wore the expression of someone calculating liability and worst-case scenarios. "Lieutenant Vance," he said, his voice carrying the formal tone of official business. "I need to inform you that all hand-loaded ammunition will require mandatory ballistics testing before you will be cleared to use it in competition. Chronograph verification across a minimum sample size of 10 rounds. Velocity spread cannot exceed 15 feet per second. Pressure signs will be evaluated on every case. Any indication of excessive pressure and the entire lot will be rejected." "Understood, sir," Kira said. "I am planning on 20-round test strings. Full chronograph workup. 20 rounds. Ortega made a notation on his clipboard. "That is 10% of your total ammunition. If you have any failures in that test batch, you will need to identify and correct the issue, then retest. Time is going to be extremely tight." "Yes, sir." "She does not sound worried," someone muttered from near the door. "Give her another hour. She will be worried then." Kira recognized the voice. Sergeant Highland again, apparently unable to stay away from the unfolding drama. She kept her attention on the scale in front of her, watching the digital numbers climb as powder trickled into the pan. 42.3 grains. Not enough. She added 2 more granules. 42.5. Perfect. The workshop had grown warm despite the early hour. The ventilation system hummed overhead, pulling away the faint chemical smell of powder and cleaning solvent. Kira could feel sweat beginning to form at her hairline, but she did not wipe it away. Her hands needed to stay clean, free of oils or moisture that might contaminate the powder or affect the seating dye's operation. Discomfort was irrelevant. The work was what mattered. Holland pulled up a stool and sat down heavily, his knees cracking with the movement. "I am staying," he announced. His tone suggested he was daring anyone to question the decision. "I want to see how this turns out." "You really think she can pull this off, Gunny?" Shin asked. His voice carried genuine curiosity now beneath the skepticism. "Hand-loaded ammunition that can compete with factory match grade?" "I think," Holland said slowly, "that I have been doing this for 32 years, and I have seen maybe 5 shooters who understood ballistics well enough to attempt what she is attempting." He paused, watching Kira's hands as she seated another bullet with precise pressure on the loading press handle. Whether she can do it in the time available, that is a different question. But the technique is sound. The approach is correct. If she finishes, and if the ammunition tests clean, then yes. "It could work." "Could work?" Shin repeated. "That is a lot of ifs, Gunny." Holland did not respond. He simply watched as Kira continued the methodical process. Charge case. Verify weight. Seat bullet. Check overall length. Repeat. The rhythm was almost meditative, a familiar sequence that her hands knew independent of conscious thought. She had done this hundreds of times before, though never under these circumstances, never with an audience waiting to witness failure, never with a competition slot hanging in the balance of whether she could complete 200 rounds of precision ammunition before time expired and her opportunity vanished. 50 rounds complete now. Quarter of the way finished. The chronograph verification would take at least 20 minutes, probably longer if Captain Ortega was serious about his sample size requirements. That left her roughly 90 minutes to complete the remaining 150 rounds. Achievable, but only if she maintained current pace without errors, without dropped components, without any of the small disasters that could derail a reloading session under normal circumstances, much less under the pressure of ticking clock and watching skeptics. Outside the window, the sun had fully cleared the mountains now. The competition would begin in 2 hours and 12 minutes. Shooters would be gathering at the equipment bay, checking weapons, reviewing range cards, running through the mental preparation that preceded any high-stakes performance. And she was here, in this workshop, proving something that she should not have needed to prove, rebuilding from sabotage what should have been ready and waiting in a locked case. But as her hands continued their work, as another completed round joined the growing rows in the loading block, Kira felt something that might have been satisfaction beneath the pressure. They had tried to eliminate her from this competition through theft and sabotage. They had assumed she would withdraw, would accept the easy out that Cordell and Ortega had offered. They had bet money on her failure, had gathered to watch her struggle, had spoken their doubts loud enough for her to hear every skeptical word. And in 90 minutes, she would walk onto that firing line with 200 rounds of handcrafted ammunition that would either validate their skepticism or silence it completely. There was a certain clarity in that binary outcome, a simplicity that stripped away everything except capability and result. She would either succeed or fail, and everyone watching would know which one occurred. No ambiguity, no excuses, just performance measured against the unforgiving standard of targets at distance. 100 rounds complete. Kira glanced at the clock mounted above the workshop door. 07:30. 90 minutes remaining before the hard deadline Captain Ortega had established. 90 minutes to finish the second 100 rounds, conduct the mandatory chronograph testing, and transport everything to the firing line. The mathematics were unforgiving, but still favorable if nothing went wrong. The door opened, and a fresh group of Marines entered, their boots tracking dust from the range complex. Kira recognized several faces from the pre-competition briefings. Sergeant First Class Rivera, a Marine sniper instructor with 2 combat deployments. Staff Sergeant Kimball, who had placed 3rd in last year's division competition. Corporal Danes, younger than the others, his face still showing the uncertainty of someone relatively new to the precision shooting community. Rivera moved directly to the workbench, his eyes scanning the completed ammunition in the loading blocks. He picked up one of the rounds and held it to the light exactly as Holland had done, examining the bullet seating, the case neck, the primer depth. His expression remained neutral, but Kira saw his eyebrows rise fractionally. "That is clean work," he said. His tone carried surprise, poorly disguised as casual observation. Holland grunted acknowledgement from his stool. "She knows her craft," he said. "Whether she can maintain quality through the full lot remains to be seen, but the first 100 are solid." "Yeah, but look at the timeline," Kimball interjected. He checked his watch with theatrical precision. "Hour and a half left. She still needs to load another 100, test, fire, minimum 10 rounds through the chronograph, verify pressure signs, and get to the line." He shook his head slowly. "Even if the ammo is perfect, which is a big if, she is cutting it so close that any problem becomes catastrophic." Chun, who had remained in the workshop for the past hour, nodded agreement. "Exactly what I have been saying. One stuck case, one primer that seats wrong, one bullet that does not want to chamber cleanly, and she is done. Game over. No recovery time." Kira continued working through their commentary. She had learned years ago that responding to skepticism was less effective than simply performing. Words were cheap in military culture. Results were the currency that actually mattered. Another case charged with powder. Another bullet seated with precise pressure. Another completed round added to the block. The rhythm remained steady despite the growing crowd and their predictions of imminent failure. Corporal Danes moved closer to the bench, watching her hands with obvious fascination. He seemed less interested in predicting her failure than in understanding her process. "How do you keep the powder charges so consistent?" he asked. "The scale shows exact weight every time." "Practice," Kira said simply. "And good equipment. The scale is calibrated. The powder measure is set correctly. The technique is just repetition until your hands know the feel of the right charge weight before the scale confirms it." 3 years of practice, Chin muttered. "That is what it takes. Not one morning under pressure." Rivera set the cartridge back in the loading block and pulled up another stool beside Holland. Both senior NCOs sat watching now, their presence lending an official weight to the proceedings. More Marines continued to filter into the workshop. Captain Ortega returned, clipboard still in hand, his expression suggesting he was mentally drafting the incident report he would need to file if this experiment ended badly. Lieutenant Ortega said, "I need you to understand the testing protocol clearly. 10 rounds minimum through the chronograph. I will be looking for velocity consistency within 15 feet per second across the entire string. That is the standard for match-grade ammunition. Additionally, I will personally inspect every fired case for pressure signs, flattened primers, ejector marks, excessive case head expansion, any indication that you are running pressures outside safe parameters, and I will reject the entire lot." "Understood, sir," Kira replied. She did not look up from her work. The seating die required precise feel, pressure applied smoothly and consistently to ensure each bullet seated to exactly the same depth. Too much force could deform the bullet. Too little would result in inconsistent overall cartridge length and erratic accuracy. Her hands maintained the exact pressure borne from thousands of previous repetitions. "You know what the failure rate is for hand-loaded ammunition in competition?" Kimball asked. He directed the question to no one in particular, though his eyes remained fixed on Kira. 67%. Two-thirds of shooters who show up with hand loads either fail chronograph testing or experience malfunctions during competition. Factory match ammunition has a failure rate under 5%. Those are not opinions. Those are documented statistics. Holland shifted on his stool. "Most shooters who hand load do not know what they are doing," he said. "They read one article, watch one video, think they understand the science. Real ballistics knowledge takes years to develop." "Exactly," Kimball said. "Years. Not hours." He gestured toward Kira. "No disrespect intended, Lieutenant, but hoping your ammunition works and knowing it will work are very different states of confidence." Kira finished round 120, 80 remaining. The clock showed 07:45, 75 minutes until deadline. She reached for another case from the prepared brass bin and continued the sequence. Her shoulders were beginning to ache from maintaining position at the workbench. Her eyes felt dry from concentration. Fatigue was attempting to establish a foothold in her attention, looking for the small opening that would lead to a measurement error or a procedural mistake. She recognized the feeling and pushed through it with practiced discipline. Outside the window, she could see the competition firing line coming to life. Shooters were arriving now, setting up their equipment, conducting pre-competition weapon checks. Range flags were being raised. Target frames were being positioned at the marked distances. The entire infrastructure of the competition was moving forward on its established schedule, indifferent to whether she would be ready to participate. Rivera pulled out his phone and made a call. His voice carried clearly in the workshop. "Yeah, I am at the ballistics building. You need to see this. The SEAL lieutenant, the one whose ammo got stolen. She is hand-loading her entire competition lot from scratch. No, I am serious. Full precision reload, proper technique, everything by the book. Get over here. More audience members incoming," Chun said. He had positioned himself near the window where he could watch both Kira's work and the activity on the firing line. "This is turning into quite the show. Half the competition is going to miss their warm-up time because they are watching her try to pull off the impossible." "It is not impossible," Dane said quietly. The young corporal's voice carried conviction that seemed to surprise even himself. "I mean, it is really difficult, and the timeline is brutal, but the technique is sound. If she finishes and the ammunition tests good, it could work." "Could," Kimball emphasized. "That word is doing a lot of heavy lifting in your assessment, Corporal." The workshop door opened again, and 3 more Marines entered, followed by 2 Army snipers who had registered for the competition. Word had clearly spread beyond the Marine contingent. The workshop was becoming crowded now, bodies filling the available space, attention focused entirely on the woman at the workbench who continued to work with methodical precision despite her growing audience. One of the Army snipers, a staff sergeant whose name tape read Morrison, approached the bench and examined the completed ammunition. He picked up several rounds, weighing them in his hand, checking the bullets seating by eye. "This is legitimate work," he said. His tone carried professional respect. "I have been hand-loading for 8 years, and this is match-quality technique." He looked directly at Kira. "Where did you train?" "Fort Benning Advanced Marksmanship Program," Kira said, "and 4 years of practical application with the teams." Morrison nodded slowly. "That explains the skill level." He set the rounds back carefully. "But the timeline is going to kill you. Even with perfect execution, you're looking at maybe 5 minutes of buffer time before your competition slot expires. One problem, anything at all, and you are out." "Then I had better not have any problems," Kira said. The statement hung in the air for a moment. It was not bravado, not false confidence, just a simple acknowledgement of the reality facing her. Success required perfection across every remaining step. Anything less meant failure, and failure meant validating every skeptical prediction being voiced around her. Holland stood slowly from his stool, his joints protesting the movement. "I'm going to set up the chronograph," he announced. "Lieutenant, when you finish the last round, bring 20 for testing. Not 10, 20. I want to see full statistical analysis on this ammunition before you take it to the line." "That will cut into her timeline even more," Chen observed. Holland fixed it with a flat stare. "If the ammunition is not verified properly, she should not be shooting it in competition regardless of timeline. We do this right, or we do not do it all." He turned back to Kira. 20 rounds for testing. "Agreed?" "Agreed, Gunny," Kira said. Holland nodded and moved toward the door, his gait showing the accumulated wear of decades in service. Half the crowd followed him out, migrating toward the chronograph station where the testing would occur. The workshop felt slightly less claustrophobic with fewer bodies, but the intensity had not diminished. If anything, it had increased. The final phase was approaching. Completion of the ammunition, the moment of truth at the chronograph, and then the walk to the firing line where 200 rounds of handcrafted ammunition would either perform as intended or fail spectacularly in front of everyone who had gathered to witness this experiment in determination and skill. Kira reached for another case and continued working. 150 rounds complete. 50 remaining. 68 minutes until deadline. The mathematics remained unforgiving but achievable. Her hands knew what to do. The process was familiar despite the circumstances. And somewhere beyond the pressure and the skepticism and the ticking clock, there was a competition waiting. Targets at distance. A rifle. And the simple question of whether she could prove that capability mattered more than sabotage. The final cartridge slid into the loading block at Ojai 22. 200 rounds complete. Kira straightened slowly, feeling her spine realign after 2 hours bent over the workbench. Her hands were steady despite the sustained precision work, muscle memory overriding the fatigue that pressed against the edges of her concentration. She selected 20 rounds from different positions across the loading blocks, ensuring a representative sample from throughout the manufacturing process. Captain Ortega appeared at her shoulder, his clipboard ready. "Testing station is prepared," he said. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Holland is waiting. You have 38 minutes until your competition slot expires. 38 minutes to conduct chronograph testing, verify pressure signs, transport ammunition to the firing line, and complete equipment check-in." The timeline had compressed to the point where success now depended on factors beyond her control. If the chronograph malfunctioned, if the computer system required reboot, if any administrative delay occurred, she would miss her window regardless of ammunition quality. Kira gathered the 20 test rounds into a plastic case and moved toward the door. The remaining Marines in the workshop fell silent as she passed, their skepticism now mixed with something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or the recognition that they were witnessing something unusual, an outcome still undetermined, but no longer dismissible as obvious failure. The chronograph station occupied a dedicated bay on the near range, a covered shooting position with electronic sensors positioned 15 feet downrange to measure bullet velocity. Holland stood behind the equipment table, his weathered hands moving across the computer keyboard with surprising dexterity. The system was already initialized, the sensors calibrated, everything prepared for immediate testing. Rivera and Morrison had claimed positions on either side of the shooting station, both men holding spotting scopes. Kimball stood behind Holland, watching the computer screen. Chun leaned against the support post, arms crossed, his expression suggesting he was waiting for vindication of his predictions. At least 20 other shooters had gathered in a loose semicircle behind the firing line, competition preparation apparently abandoned in favor of witnessing this test. Lieutenant Vance, Holland said formally, "You may begin when ready. I will be recording velocity data for all 20 rounds. After firing, you will police your brass and present all cases for pressure sign inspection." "Understood, Gunny." Kira moved to the shooting bench and loaded the first round into her rifle, a custom Remington 700.308 Winchester that she had built specifically for precision competition. The bolt closed smoothly, the cartridge chambering without resistance. She settled into position, acquiring the target frame at 100 meters, controlling her breathing to the familiar rhythm that preceded every shot. The trigger broke cleanly. The rifle recoiled straight back into her shoulder. Downrange, the chronograph sensors registered the bullet's passage and transmitted data to Holland's computer. 2,847 feet per second, Holland announced. He made a notation on his data sheet. "Continue." Kira cycled the bolt, extracted the fired case, set it carefully in the brass tray. She loaded the second round and repeated the process. The trigger broke. The rifle fired. The chronograph recorded. 2,851 feet per second, Holland called. "For feet per second variance from the first round." "That is tight," Morrison said quietly. His voice carried professional assessment rather than surprise. "Really tight for hand-loaded ammunition." 3 shots, Kimball countered. "Let us see if she can maintain consistency across the full string." The third shot registered 2,849 feet per second. The fourth came in at 2,846. The fifth matched the first at 2,847. Kira continued through the string methodically, each shot fired with identical technique, each fired case added to the growing collection in the brass tray. At 10 rounds, Holland paused to review his data. "Velocity spread of 7 feet per second across 10 shots," he announced. His tone remained professionally neutral, but Kira saw him exchange a glance with Rivera. "That is exceptional consistency." "We are only halfway through the test," Chin said. "Plenty of opportunity for the numbers to open up." Kira loaded the 11th round. The rifle fired. 2,848 feet per second. The 12th shot registered 2,850. The 13th came back to 2,847. The pattern held, velocity varying by tiny margins around a central average. The kind of consistency that factory match ammunition struggled to achieve, much less hand-loaded rounds manufactured under time pressure. 15 rounds complete, Holland said. Velocity extreme spread of 8 feet per second. Standard deviation under 3 feet per second. He looked up from the computer screen, his eyes finding Kira's. "That is match-grade performance, Lieutenant. Better than match-grade." "Still 5 rounds remaining," Kimball said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Kira fired the 16th shot. 2,849 feet per second. 17th shot. 2,846. 18th. 2,851. The numbers continued to cluster tightly around the average, each measurement confirming what the previous measurements had established. The 19th shot broke, and the chronograph recorded 2,847 feet per second. Kira loaded the final test round, settled into position one last time, controlled her breathing, pressed the trigger through its arc of travel until it released. 2,848 feet per second, Holland announced. He entered the final data point and studied his screen. 20 rounds fired. Velocity extreme spread of 8 feet per second. Standard deviation of 2.3 feet per second. He stood slowly and turned to face the assembled shooters. "That is the most consistent hand-loaded ammunition I have seen in 32 years of competition shooting." The statement hung in the air. Chin's arms uncrossed slowly. Kimball stared at the computer screen as if the numbers might change under observation. Rivera nodded slowly, his expression acknowledging something he had suspected but now saw confirmed. Morrison broke the silence. "What is the pressure sign assessment?" he asked. "Velocity consistency means nothing if she is running dangerous pressures." Holland nodded. "Bring me the brass, Lieutenant." Kira collected the 20 fire cases from the tray and presented them to Holland. He took them one at a time, examining each case head under a magnifying glass, checking for flattened primers, ejector marks, excessive expansion, any indication of pressure beyond safe specifications. He worked methodically, his examination thorough and professional. After inspecting the 15th case, he set it down and looked at Captain Ortega. "All cases show normal pressure signs," he said. "Primers are rounded appropriately. No ejector marks. No case had expansion beyond expected parameters. This ammunition is safe for competition use." Ortega made notations on his clipboard. He checked his watch, then looked at Kira. "You have 24 minutes to reach the firing line and complete equipment check-in," he said. "If you can manage that timeline, you're clear to compete with your hand-loaded ammunition." "Thank you, sir," Kira said. She began collecting her test rifle and the plastic case containing the remaining 180 rounds. "Hold on," Chun said. He pushed off the support post and moved closer to the shooting bench. "How is this possible? Seriously, 2 hours of loading time, first batch of ammunition, and she produces match-grade consistency that most of us cannot achieve with years of development work. There has to be something we are missing here." Holland picked up one of the test cartridges and held it toward Chun. "What you're missing," he said, "is that she actually knows what she is doing. Understanding ballistics theory is not the same as reading about it on internet forums. She has formal training, practical application, and enough repetitions that her technique is ingrained." He set the cartridge down carefully. "The outcome surprises you because you assumed competence was impossible in the available time frame. But competence does not operate on your assumptions about what should or should not be achievable." Chin's jaw tightened, but he offered no response. Rivera moved to help Kira gather her equipment. "I will walk with you to the firing line," he said. "Make sure you get through check-in without any administrative delays." "Appreciate that, Sergeant," Kira replied. The crowd parted as she moved away from the chronograph station. Faces that had shown skepticism now showed something closer to confusion, as if the script they had expected to follow had been rewritten without warning. Predictions of failure were being recalibrated in real time, judgments adjusted to account for data that contradicted comfortable assumptions. Kira walked across the compound toward the main firing line, Rivera matching her pace. Behind them, she could hear conversations resuming, voices processing what they had just witnessed, try to reconcile their expectations with observed reality. The chronograph data was unambiguous. 8 feet per second velocity spread, 2.3 feet per second standard deviation. Numbers that spoke louder than any verbal defense she could have offered. The main equipment bay came into view. Shooters lined up for check-in, weapons and ammunition being logged by range personnel. The competition was 20 minutes from official start time. Kira joined the line, her plastic case of hand-loaded ammunition clearly visible to everyone present. Sergeant Highland stood near the check-in table, his arms crossed, his face showing the expression of someone whose betting pool was not trending in his favor. He watched her approach with narrowed eyes. "Heard you pass chronograph testing," he said. His tone suggested disbelief fighting against confirmed information. 8-foot extremes spread across 20 rounds, Rivera said before Kira could respond. "Better than factory match grade." Master Gunnery Sergeant Holland called it the most consistent hand-loaded ammunition he has seen in 3 decades. Highland's expression shifted through several emotions in quick succession. Surprise, doubt, calculation. He looked at Chun, who had followed them from the chronograph station. "That accurate?" he asked. Chun nodded slowly. "The data does not lie," he said. "Whatever else you want to say about it, the ammunition performs." He paused, then added, "She knows her craft." We underestimated that. The admission seemed to cost him something, but he offered it anyway. Kira felt a small measure of respect for the honesty, even if it came wrapped in the recognition that his skepticism had been misplaced. The check-in line moved forward. Kira stepped up to the table where a corporal was logging equipment. She presented her rifle and the ammunition case. The corporal inspected both, verified her registration number, made entries in his log. "You are cleared for competition," he said. "Firing line opens in 15 minutes. Your assigned position is Lane 7. Good luck, Lieutenant." Kira collected her equipment and moved toward Lane 7. The firing line stretched before her, 20 positions marked with flags and shooting mats, target frames visible at multiple distances downrange. Other competitors were settling into their positions, arranging ammunition and equipment, conducting final weapon checks. Some watched her approach with obvious curiosity. Others pretended not to notice, while clearly tracking her movement through peripheral vision. She reached Lane 7 and began setting up. 200 rounds of handcrafted ammunition, one rifle, multiple target distances, and a competition that would demonstrate whether chronograph data translated into actual performance downrange, where precision mattered and second chances did not exist. The range officer's voice crackled through the speaker system mounted on the control tower. "All competitors to the firing line. 600-meter stage will commence in 5 minutes. Prepare your equipment and await the command to assume shooting positions." Kira arranged her ammunition in neat rows on the shooting mat, 20 rounds accessible for the first stage, the remainder organized by distance in separate groups. Her rifle rested on its bipod, the barrel pointed downrange toward the white target frame 600 meters distant. The morning sun had climbed higher now, painting the desert in harsh light that created mirage conditions along the sightline. Heat shimmer would be a factor, distorting the target image through the scope, requiring her to focus through the distortion to find clear aim points. In the lane to her left, Staff Sergeant Kimball was conducting final equipment checks, his movements efficient and practiced. 2 lanes to her right, Sergeant First Class Rivera adjusted his scope turrets, making minute elevation corrections based on current atmospheric conditions. Both men had competed in this event before. Both knew the range, the wind patterns, the subtle environmental factors that separated winners from Alsorans. Kimball glanced toward her lane, his eyes dropping to the rows of ammunition on her mat. "First round at 600, you will know if the chronograph numbers translate to actual accuracy," he said. "Velocity consistency is one thing. Hitting targets is another." His tone was not hostile, just matter-of-fact assessment from someone with years of competition experience. "Guess we will find out," Kira replied. She kept her attention on her equipment, verifying everything was positioned correctly, nothing that would require adjustment once the shooting commenced. Behind the firing line, a substantial crowd had gathered. Word of the chronograph results had spread through the facility. Shooters who were not competing in this time slot had migrated to the observation area. Range personnel had stopped their normal duties to watch. Even some of the base administrative staff had appeared, drawn by the unusual circumstances surrounding her participation. Holland stood near the control tower, arms crossed, his weathered face showing professional interest. Captain Ortega occupied a position beside him, clipboard still in hand, prepared to document whatever outcome manifested. Chun and Highland were visible in the crowd, both men watching with expressions that mixed curiosity with residual skepticism. "Competitors, assume shooting positions," the range officer announced. "You will have 2 minutes to acquire your target and prepare. Firing will commence on my command. 10 shots per competitor. All shots must be fired within the 8-minute time limit. Scoring will be assessed after all competitors have completed the stage." Kira settled behind her rifle, her body finding the familiar position developed through thousands of practice repetitions. Left hand supporting the forestock, right hand on the pistol grip, cheek weld firm against the stock. I aligned with the scope. The target came into focus at 600 meters, a white silhouette against the desert backdrop. Wind flags along the range showed a mild left-to-right crosswind, maybe 4 miles per hour, not enough to require significant hold-off at this distance, but enough to matter if ignored. The rifle felt solid beneath her, the custom build perfectly balanced for her frame and shooting style. But the ammunition was unknown in practical application. Chronograph data provided mathematical confidence, but bullets did not travel through mathematical spaces. They traveled through air and wind and heat shimmer, through the imperfect reality where theory met result. Firing line is hot, the range officer called. Commence firing at your discretion. The first shot is always diagnostic. It reveals what the rifle and ammunition will do under current conditions, provides the baseline data against which all subsequent shots are measured. Kira controlled her breathing, let half the air out of her lungs, held steady, pressed the trigger through its travel until it broke cleanly. The rifle recoiled straight back. The bullet crossed 600 meters in less than a second. Through the scope, Kira saw the impact marker appear on the target. Center mass. Perfect hit. She cycled the bolt, loaded the second round, settled back into position. Second shot broke the same as the first. Another center mass impact. The ammunition was performing exactly as the chronograph data had predicted. Velocity consistency translating directly into point-of impact consistency. Third shot, fourth shot, fifth shot. Each bullet struck within a 4-inch group at center mass, precision that exceeded the minimum accuracy standard by a comfortable margin. Around her, other rifles fired in a regular rhythm as competitors worked through their own strings. Kimball finished his 10 shots in 6 minutes, his technique polished and efficient. Rivera took slightly longer, each shot carefully prepared and executed. Down the line, other shooters displayed varying levels of skill and consistency. Kira fired her 6th shot, watched it impact 2 inches right of center. Wind had shifted slightly, the flag showing increased velocity from left to right. She adjusted her aim point to compensate and fired the 7th shot. Center mass again. The ammunition was responding predictably to her inputs, allowing her to make corrections and see immediate results. 8th shot, 9th shot, 10th shot, all center mass hits, the group measuring approximately 6 inches across at 600 meters. She safed her rifle and sat back from the shooting position. The first stage was complete, and the hand-loaded ammunition had performed without issue. No malfunctions, no erratic impacts, no indication that the compressed development timeline had compromised quality. Ceasefire, the range officer announced. All competitors step back from your weapons. Scoring personnel will assess targets and post results. The crowd behind the firing line stirred as range personnel moved downrange with spotting scopes to evaluate each target. Conversations resumed, voices carrying across the morning air. Kira could hear fragments of commentary, assessments of her performance filtering through the ambient noise. She put all 10 in the center, someone said. The voice sounded surprised. With hand-loaded ammo manufactured in 2 hours, another voice added. How is that even possible? Holland knows ballistics better than anyone on this base, a third voice said. If he called it match grade, then it is match grade. We just saw the proof. Kimball approached her lane, his rifle slung across his back. Clean shooting, Lieutenant, he said. His tone carried genuine respect now. The earlier skepticism replaced by professional acknowledgement. Your ammunition performed exactly like factory match loads. Better than some factory loads I have used. Thank you, Sergeant, Kira replied. First stage is the easy one, though, Kimball continued. 600 meters, relatively calm conditions, large target area. The real test comes at 800 and beyond. That is where ammunition consistency really matters, where even small velocity variations start showing up as vertical dispersion in your groups. Understood, Kira said. She had trained at those distances extensively, knew exactly what Kimball was describing. Vertical stringing in groups usually indicated velocity inconsistency, bullets leaving the barrel at slightly different speeds and therefore arriving at different heights on target. Her chronograph data suggested that should not be an issue, but chronograph data and downrange reality sometimes diverged in unexpected ways. Rivera joined them, his expression showing professional curiosity. "What powder charge are you running?" he asked. That level of consistency usually requires extensive load development to dial in the optimal pressure curve for your specific rifle. 42.5 grains of Arget, Kira said. Federal gold medal match primers. Sierra Match King bullets at 175 grains. Standard precision loading components. Same load I use, Rivera said. He looked thoughtful. Took me 8 months to develop that load for my rifle, testing at quarter-grain increments to find the accuracy node. You pulled it off in 2 hours. Had good training and enough previous experience to know what should work, Kira replied. Sometimes the fundamentals are enough if you apply them correctly. The range officer's voice returned to the speaker system. First stage results are posted. Competitors may review scores before the 800-meter stage begins in 15 minutes. Kira walked to the scoring board where results had been posted on a whiteboard visible to all participants. Her name appeared third from the top, 94 points out of a possible 100. 2 competitors had scored 96, both Marines with extensive competition experience. The rest of the field trailed behind, scores ranging from 92 down to 78. Solid performance, Holland said. He had moved to stand beside the scoring board, his arms still crossed. Top 3 in the first stage with ammunition you built this morning. That silenced a few of the louder skeptics. Still 7 stages to go, Kira said. Holland nodded. 800 meters next. Then 1,000. That is where we see if your ammunition maintains consistency as distance increases. He paused, studying her face. How are you feeling? Fatigue catching up yet? I am fine, Gunny, Kira replied. The adrenaline from the compressed timeline was still carrying her, pushing back against the physical exhaustion that would eventually demand acknowledgement. But not yet. Not while the competition continued. Good, Holland said, because the Marines you are competing against are watching now. Really watching. They showed up expecting you to fail, and instead you are running in the top 3. That changes the dynamic. Some of them will raise their performance level because you just proved they underestimated the competition. Kira understood what he was saying. Her success had elevated the stakes for everyone else. Competitors who might have been satisfied with middle-tier finishes would now push harder, not wanting to be beaten by the SEAL lieutenant who had overcome sabotage to even reach the firing line. The pressure was about to increase, and not just on her. Competitors to the line, the range officer called. 800-meter stage will commence in 10 minutes. Prepare your equipment and await firing commands. Kira returned to lane 7 and began arranging ammunition for the next stage. 800 meters. Longer distance, more time for wind to affect the bullet, more opportunity for small variations in ammunition quality to manifest as misses. The chronograph had shown her ammunition was consistent. The 600-meter stage had confirmed it performed well under relatively easy conditions. Now came the real test, the distances where precision shooting separated adequate from excellent, where hand-loaded ammunition would either continue performing or begin showing the weaknesses that Kimball and others had predicted. She loaded the first round into her rifle and settled into position. The target at 800 meters appeared smaller through the scope, the wind flags showing variable conditions between the firing line and target area. Mirage was building as temperature increased, adding another complication to an already demanding shot. But her ammunition had tested true. Her rifle was zeroed correctly, and she had 200 rounds of consistent, reliable ammunition that she had built with her own hands under conditions specifically designed to force her failure. The range officer's voice crackled through the speakers. Firing line is hot. Commence firing at your discretion. Kira acquired the target, read the wind, calculated her hold, and pressed the trigger. The bullet crossed 800 meters and struck center mass. The hand-loaded ammunition continued performing exactly as required. The competition continued, and somewhere in the crowd behind her, the remaining skeptics were running out of predictions to make about her inevitable failure. The 800-meter target filled Kira's scope, the white silhouette wavering slightly through the heat mirage that had built with the climbing sun. Wind flags between her position and the target showed inconsistent patterns, gusts pushing from left to right at varying velocities. Reading wind at distance required interpreting multiple data points simultaneously, understanding how air movement at different ranges would affect the bullet during its time of flight. She fired the first shot, watching the bullet trace through her scope. The impact appeared slightly left of center, maybe 3 inches off her aim point. The wind had been stronger than her initial read suggested. She adjusted her hold for the second shot, adding more right-hand offset to compensate. The trigger broke, and the bullet struck dead center. "Good correction," Kimball said from the adjacent lane. He had paused his own shooting to observe her adjustment. "Wind is tricky today. Switching speeds every 30 seconds or so." Kira nodded acknowledgement and continued her string. Third shot center mass. Fourth shot caught an unexpected gust and landed 4 inches right, but still well within the scoring zone. Fifth shot back to center after she compensated for the gust. The ammunition was performing consistently, allowing her to make wind calls and see predictable results. Any vertical dispersion would indicate velocity variations in the hand-loaded rounds, but her impacts were staying horizontally aligned, spreading only left and right based on wind, rather than showing the vertical stringing that marked inconsistent ammunition. She completed her 10 shots in 7 minutes, each impact landing within an 8-inch circle at center mass. The group size was larger than at 600 meters, but that was expected given the increased distance and variable wind conditions. What mattered was that all 10 shots had scored, and the ammunition had functioned without malfunction or erratic performance. Down the line, other competitors were finishing their strings. Rivera fired his final shot and saved his weapon. Morrison, the Army staff sergeant who had examined her ammunition in the workshop, completed his string with methodical precision. Several younger competitors showed more difficulty with the wind calls, their groups spreading wider as they struggled to read the shifting conditions. "Cease fire," the range officer announced, scoring personnel downrange. The crowd behind the firing line had grown larger. More base personnel had arrived during the transition between stages, word continuing to spread about the morning's unusual circumstances. Kira could see officers from the base command staff, senior enlisted personnel from multiple units, even some civilian contractors who worked in the armory facility. What had started as a competition had become something else, a public demonstration of whether capability could overcome sabotage and institutional doubt. Chun stood near the observation tower, talking with Highland. Both men watched the scoring personnel assess targets downrange. Their body language had changed from the confident skepticism of earlier. Arms were no longer crossed. Postures had shifted from dismissive to attentive. The narrative they had expected to unfold was not manifesting according to plan. Holland approached the firing line, stopping at Kira's position. "How is the ammunition holding up?" he asked. "Any indications of performance degradation?" "None, Gunny," Kira replied. "Velocity is staying consistent. No vertical stringing in my groups. Everything is behaving exactly like the chronograph data predicted." Holland picked up one of her fired cases from the brass tray, examining it under the harsh sunlight. "Primer still looks good," he said. "No pressure signs developing." He set the case back down carefully. "You are proving a point today, Lieutenant. Question is whether people are willing to learn from it." "Samar," Kira said. She glanced toward Rivera and Morrison, both of whom had offered professional respect. "Kimball, too, even if he is still cautious about it. Others will need more convincing," Holland said. His eyes tracked toward Chun and Highland. "Some people invest heavily in their assumptions. Changing those assumptions requires more evidence than should be necessary." He paused, then added, "But the evidence is accumulating. Top 3 after 2 stages. That is not luck. That is skill and preparation meeting opportunity." The range officer's voice crackled through the speakers. 800-meter results are posted. 1,000-meter stage will commence in 20 minutes. Kira walked to the scoring board. Her name had moved up to second place overall. 92 points in the 800-meter stage, combined with her 94 from 600 meters, put her just 3 points behind the current leader, a Marine gunnery sergeant named Walsh who had won this competition twice before. Rivera sat in third place, for points back. Morrison held fourth. Kimball had dropped to sixth after a difficult wind call cost him 2 shots outside the scoring zone. Walsh stood near the board, studying the standings. He was older than most competitors, maybe early 40s, with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent decades in desert environments. His eyes moved from the board to Kira, assessing her with professional interest rather than skepticism. "You're shooting well, Lieutenant," he said. His voice carried the gravelly quality of too many years of shouting commands across training ranges. "Heard about what happened with your ammunition this morning. Most shooters would have withdrawn. You turned it into a competitive performance." "Had good training," Kira replied, "and decent luck with the low development." "That was not luck," Walsh said. "I watched your 800-meter string. Your groups showed no vertical dispersion. That means your velocity consistency is staying tight across the full lot of ammunition, not just the 20 rounds you tested." He gestured toward the competition field. 1,000-meter stage is where ammunition quality really shows. Any velocity variation starts opening up your groups significantly. You will know in the next stage whether your full ammunition lot maintains the same consistency as your test sample. "Understood, Gunny," Kira said. Walsh nodded slowly. "I have been shooting this competition for 12 years, he said. Never seen anyone show up with hand-loaded ammunition built the same morning and run in the top 3 through 2 stages. Whatever else happens today, you earned respect from people who did not think they would be giving it." He moved away toward his own lane. Kira watched him go, recognizing the weight of the acknowledgement. Walsh was not someone who offered praise easily. His reputation in the precision shooting community was built on performance and uncompromising standards. If he said she had earned respect, then she had genuinely accomplished something beyond simply competing. Rivera approached with Morrison. Both men carried spare ammunition containers, preparing for the longer distance stages where more rounds would be required. "They look worried now," Rivera said quietly, gesturing toward Chun and Highland with his chin. "Started the morning confident you would fail. Now they're watching you run second overall with ammunition they assumed would not even function. Bet they are regretting their wagers," Morrison added. He checked his watch. 20 minutes until 1,000 meters. That is where the real separation starts happening. Shooters who look solid at 6 and 800 sometimes fall apart when distance extends past 1,000. Wind calls get harder, group sizes start opening up, pressure builds. "You expecting me to fall apart?" Kira asked. Her tone was light, but the question was genuine. Morrison shook his head. "Your fundamentals are too solid," he said, "and your ammunition has proven itself. But expectation and reality sometimes diverge at distance. We will know more after the next 3 stages." The crowd continued to grow as word spread beyond the range facility. Kira could see people arriving from other parts of the base, drawn by the unusual story playing out at the competition. A female SEAL lieutenant overcoming sabotage to compete with handcrafted ammunition, running second overall against Marine snipers who had assumed she did not belong in their competition. It was the kind of narrative that attracted attention beyond the normal boundaries of competitive shooting. Captain Ortega moved through the crowd, his clipboard still present, his expression showing a man recalculating assumptions made earlier. He stopped at the scoring board, studied the standings, then walked to where Holland stood observing the range. "Master Gunnery Sergeant," Ortega said formally, "I need to acknowledge that I expected different results this morning. I offered Lieutenant Vance multiple opportunities to withdraw because I genuinely believed her ammunition would not perform to competitive standards. I was wrong. We were all making assumptions," Holland replied. "Some of us just made different assumptions than others." Kira returned to lane 7 and began preparing for the 1,000-meter stage. This distance would require more careful wind reading, more precise trigger control, more attention to every detail of shot execution. The margin for error was shrinking as distance increased. A small mistake at 1,000 meters became a miss, and misses accumulated into lost points and dropped rankings. but her ammunition had held. 2 stages complete, 0 malfunctions, consistent accuracy, predictable performance. The chronograph numbers had translated into downrange reality exactly as the data suggested they should. And now the competition was entering the phase where long-range precision truly mattered, where the quality of her hand-loaded ammunition would face its most demanding test. She loaded 20 rounds onto her shooting mat and arranged them in neat rows. The 1,000-meter target was barely visible downrange, a white rectangle against the desert background. Wind flags showed building velocity, conditions becoming more challenging as the day progressed. Other competitors were settling into their lanes, conducting final equipment checks, reviewing their databooks for elevation and windage settings at this distance. Competitors to the line, the range officer called. 1,000-meter stage will commence in 10 minutes. Kira settled behind her rifle and began her preparation. The crowd behind her had gone quiet, attention focused entirely on the firing line. Somewhere in that crowd, Chun and Highland were watching, their predictions of failure becoming less confident with each completed stage. Holland observed with professional interest, his assessment already shifting from doubt to vindication. And Walsh, the 2-time champion, was preparing his own equipment while keeping one eye on the SEAL lieutenant who had turned sabotage into opportunity and was now threatening his position at the top of the standings. The competition continued. The ammunition performed. And the story of what had happened this morning was spreading through the base like fire through dry grass, carrying with it questions about assumptions and capability and what happened when someone refused to accept the easy exit that everyone expected them to take. The 1,000-meter target appeared smaller through the scope, requiring more precise hold and steadier control. Wind at this distance became exponentially more complex, with air moving at different velocities across the bullet's 3-second flight time. Kira watched the flags positioned at intervals downrange, reading the patterns, calculating the aggregate effect on her bullet's trajectory. "Firing line is hot," the range officer announced. "Commence firing at your discretion." Kira settled into her shooting position, her breathing controlled and rhythmic. The first shot at 1,000 meters was always revelatory, showing whether all the preparation and calculation translated into accurate impact. She pressed the trigger and watched through the scope as the bullet crossed the distance. 3 seconds felt longer when waiting for confirmation. The impact marker appeared just left of center, maybe 6 inches off her aim point. She adjusted her hold and fired the second shot. Center mass. The correction had worked. Third shot, fourth shot, fifth shot, all landing within a 12-inch circle at the target center. The hand-loaded ammunition was maintaining its consistency even at extended range, the velocity uniformity allowing her to make wind calls and see predictable results. In the adjacent lane, Walsh was firing his own string. His technique was textbook perfect, each shot prepared with methodical care, each trigger press executed with precision born from decades of practice. His targets at 600 and 800 meters had all shown tight groups, demonstrating why he had won this competition multiple times. But Kira was matching his performance, staying close in the standings, applying pressure that Walsh probably had not expected to face today. Kimball was struggling at 1,000 meters. His first 3 shots had scattered across a 2-foot spread, indicating difficulty reading the complex wind patterns. He paused after his 4th shot, taking extra time to reassess conditions, trying to identify what he was missing in his calculations. Rivera maintained steady performance, his groups opening slightly at distance, but remaining competitive. Morrison showed similar consistency, his military precision serving him well as conditions became more demanding. Further down the line, younger competitors were experiencing more significant difficulties, their inexperience with long-range wind reading manifesting as misses and drop points. Kira completed her 10th shot at the 9-minute mark, well within the 12-minute time limit. All 10 rounds had scored, her group measuring approximately 14 inches across at center mass. Not perfect, but solid performance under challenging conditions. She safed her weapon and stepped back from the line. The crowd had grown even larger during the 1,000-meter stage. Easily 200 people now lined the observation area, watching the competition with an intensity that exceeded normal spectator interest. This had become an event, a story unfolding in real time that transcended the usual boundaries of competitive shooting. Chin stood near the front of the crowd, no longer attempting to hide his attention. He watched the targets downrange as scoring personnel began their assessment, his expression showing someone recalculating everything he thought he knew about what was possible. Highland stood beside him, arms hanging at his sides rather than crossed, his earlier confidence completely absent. Holland moved along the firing line, observing each competitor's brass, checking for pressure signs, ensuring safety protocols were being maintained. He stopped at Kira's position and picked up several fired cases from a brass tray. "Still no pressure issues," he said. "Your load is running clean across the full distance range." He set the cases down and looked at her directly. "You are reading wind better than shooters with 10 years more experience. Where did you develop that skill?" "Deployments in violence," Kira replied. "Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria." Reading wind was not optional when engagements happened at distance, and you only got one shot before your position was compromised. "Holland nodded slowly. "Combat application," he said. "Different pressure than competition, but the fundamentals transfer." He glanced back at the crowd. Half these spectators showed up expecting to watch you fail. Now they're watching you compete for first place. That is a significant psychological reversal. The range officer's voice returned to the speakers. 1,000-meter results are posted. 1,200-meter stage will commence in 30 minutes. Competitors may review scores and conduct equipment maintenance during the break. Kira walked to the scoring board with a growing group of competitors and spectators. The standings had shifted again. Walsh maintained first place with 279 points total, but Kira had closed the gap. Second place with 276 points, just 3 points behind the two-time champion. Rivera held third at 268. Morrison sat fourth at 264. Kimball had dropped to eighth after his difficult performance at 1,000 meters. 3 points, Walsh said, appearing beside her at the board. His tone carried respect rather than concern. "This is turning into an actual competition. I expected to be running away with first place by now. Instead, I am looking over my shoulder at a SEAL lieutenant shooting hand-loaded ammunition she built this morning." "Still 4 stages remaining," Kira said. "Plenty of opportunity for things to change." "True," Walsh replied. "But 1,200 meters is where we separate the precision shooters from everyone else. Wind becomes even more complex. Bullet drop requires exact elevation settings. Group sizes open up significantly if ammunition quality is not absolutely consistent." He paused, studying her face. "Your ammunition has held so far. Question is whether it continues holding when we push to the maximum distances." "Guess we will find out," Kira said. Walsh smiled slightly. "Yes," he said, "we will." He moved away toward his own lane, leaving Kira standing at the board with the standings displayed in front of her. Rivera and Morrison approached together. "You're making this interesting," Rivera said. "Walsh usually dominates this competition by 30 or 40 points. Now he's looking at a 3-point lead with 4 stages remaining. That is pressure he is not accustomed to feeling." "He shoots well under pressure," Morrison observed. "Been doing this too long to crack now." "But Lieutenant Vance is proving something important here." She paused, then continued. "The Marines who sabotaged your ammunition, they were trying to eliminate you from competition. Instead, they created circumstances that showcased your capabilities more effectively than a normal competition would have. Everyone here now knows you can operate under extreme pressure, adapt to adverse conditions, and produce match-quality results with minimal resources and time." "That was not my goal," Kira said. "I just wanted to compete." "Outcomes matter more than intentions," Morrison replied. "And the outcome here is that you have changed minds. Maybe not everyone's minds, but enough that the culture shifts slightly. That matters in military communities." Captain Ortega was conducting what appeared to be an intense conversation with 2 Marines near the equipment bay. Even from distance, Kira recognized them as the personnel responsible for facility security. The conversation involved gestures toward the locked storage area where her ammunition had been kept overnight. An investigation was apparently underway, consequences approaching for whoever had committed the sabotage. Holland joined the group around the scoring board. 1,200 meters separates the competent from the exceptional, he said. His statement was directed at everyone, but his eyes were on Kira. At that distance, atmospheric conditions matter enormously. Temperature, humidity, air pressure, all of it affects bullet flight in measurable ways. Ammunition that performs well at 1,000 meters sometimes shows weaknesses at 1,200 because the increased flight time magnifies any inconsistencies. My ammunition tested with 2.3 feet per second standard deviation, Kira said. That should be sufficient for consistent performance, even at extended range. Should be, Holland agreed. But should be and will be sometimes diverge when you move from theory to application. He gestured toward the range. For more stages, 1,200, 1,200 again from a different position, 1,400, and the final stage at 1,400 under time pressure. Those distances will test everything. Your ammunition quality, your wind reading ability, your fundamental marksmanship skills, your ability to maintain performance under sustained pressure. Understood, Gunny, Kira replied. The 30-minute break continued. Competitors were conducting rifle maintenance, cleaning barrels, checking equipment, reviewing data books. Some were eating quick meals, refueling for the demanding stages ahead. Others were simply resting, conserving energy for the intense focus required at maximum distances. Kira returned to lane 7 and began her own preparation. She ran a bore snake through her rifle barrel, removing powder residue that could affect accuracy. She checked her scope turrets, ensuring they were tracking correctly. She verified her ammunition supply, confirming she had sufficient rounds remaining for all upcoming stages. The crowd had not dispersed during the break. If anything, more people had arrived. The story had apparently spread beyond a range facility to other parts of the base. Personnel from units across the installation were showing up to witness the conclusion of what had become more than just a competition. Chun and Highland remained in the crowd, both men now engaged in what appeared to be an uncomfortable conversation with several other Marines. Body language suggested they were answering questions they preferred not to address. The betting pool they had organized that morning was apparently becoming a liability as predictions failed to manifest. Walsh was conducting his own equipment maintenance with the same methodical precision he applied to shooting. His rifle received careful attention, each component checked and verified. But Kira noticed he glanced toward her lane several times during his preparation. The two-time champion was feeling pressure from an unexpected source, and that pressure was changing the competition's dynamics. 20 minutes until 1,200-meter stage, the range officer announced. Competitors, finalize your preparation and return to the firing line. Kira loaded fresh ammunition onto her mat and settled behind her rifle. The 1,200-meter target was barely visible even through her scope, a small white rectangle that appeared to shimmer and dance through the heavy mirage building under midday sun. This was where precision shooting became more art than science, where reading conditions and making minute adjustments separated winners from everyone else. The hand-loaded ammunition had performed flawlessly through 3 stages. But Walsh and Holland were correct. 1,200 meters would test everything more severely. Flight time increased to nearly 4 seconds. Wind had more time to affect the bullet. Small velocity variations that were invisible at shorter ranges could manifest as vertical dispersion at this distance. And she was about to discover whether the ammunition she had crafted in 2 hours under extreme pressure would continue performing when the demands reached their peak. The competition continued. The targets waited a distance. And somewhere behind her, 200 spectators watched to see if capability would continue overcoming the sabotage that had tried to eliminate her from this event before it began. The 1,200-meter target shimmered through layers of heat mirage that had built to peak intensity under the midday sun. Kira adjusted her scope focus, trying to find the clearest image possible through the atmospheric distortion. At this distance, reading conditions became as important as marksmanship fundamentals. Wind flags showed variable patterns across the range, gusts pushing at different velocities in different sectors of the bullet's flight path. Competitors to the line, the range officer called. 1,200-meter stage will commence in 5 minutes. This is a precision stage. You will fire 5 shots. Each shot will be assessed individually for accuracy. Scoring reflects precision rather than volume. 5 shots instead of 10. Each one carrying more weight in the final standings. A single miss could drop a competitor multiple positions. Perfect shooting could vault someone into contention. The pressure had escalated with the change in format. Walsh settled into his lane 2 positions to Kira's left. His movements showed the calm of extensive experience, but Kira noticed small details that suggested tension beneath the professional exterior. He checked his wind flags 3 times before assuming his shooting position. His hand adjusted his scope turrets, then checked them again. The 3-point lead was apparently not providing the comfort he had expected. Kimball had moved to the observation area rather than continuing competition. His performance at 1,000 meters had eliminated him from contention for top placements, and he had chosen to withdraw rather than complete the remaining stages. He stood near Holland, watching the firing line with an expression that mixed disappointment with obvious interest in how the top competitors would perform. "Firing line is hot," the range officer announced. "You may commence firing. Each competitor will fire 5 shots. Take your time and prioritize accuracy over speed." Kira controlled her breathing and studied the wind flags one final time. The pattern suggested a left-to-right push at approximately 7 miles per hour near the firing line, increasing to maybe 9 or 10 miles per hour at mid-range, then dropping back to 6 miles per hour near the target. The bullet would curve through that wind gradient, requiring her to calculate the aggregate effect rather than simply holding for average conditions. She settled into perfect position, her body aligned behind the rifle, her cheek weld firm against the stock. The crosshairs steadied on the target. She pressed the trigger and watched the bullet's flight. For seconds of uncertainty before the impact marker appeared. Center mass. Perfect first shot. The crowd behind the firing line remained nearly silent, only scattered breathing and the occasional shuffle of feet breaking the quiet. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something unusual, a competition that had transcended normal boundaries to become a referendum on capability and determination. Walsh fired his first shot. Center mass impact. Rivera followed with his own shot, also center mass. Morrison took his time, reading conditions carefully before firing. His bullet struck slightly high but well within the scoring zone. The top 4 competitors were all performing at high levels, no one making the catastrophic mistakes that would eliminate them from contention. Kira fired her second shot. The wind had shifted slightly, velocity increasing in the mid-range sector. She adjusted her hold and pressed the trigger. The bullet struck 2 inches left of center. Not perfect, but still a solid hit. She made a mental note of the correction needed and prepared for the third shot. The mirage was becoming more challenging as the sun reached its highest point. Heat waves created visual distortion that made precise aim point selection difficult. Kira focused through the distortion, using a technique she had developed during deployment, where waiting for perfect conditions meant never taking a shot. She identified the clearest moment in the mirage cycle and fired her third shot. Center mass again. Walsh completed his 5-shot string in 12 minutes. All 5 impacts clustered in a tight group at the target center. His technique remained flawless under pressure, demonstrating exactly why he had won this competition multiple times. But Kira noticed his eyes tracking toward her lane between shots, checking her progress, aware that she was maintaining pace with his performance. Rivera fired his 4th shot, showing increasing difficulty with the wind reading. His group was opening up, impact spreading across a larger area than his previous stages. The complex wind gradient at 1,200 meters was exposing small weaknesses in his environmental reading skills. Morrison maintained steady performance, each shot carefully prepared and executed. His military precision served him well, keeping him competitive even as conditions became more demanding. But he was losing ground to the top two shooters, the gap widening as distance increased. Kira fired her fourth shot and watched it impact slightly right of center. The wind had gusted unexpectedly, pushing harder than her calculation had predicted. She adjusted for the fifth and final shot, holding further left to compensate for the increased wind. The trigger broke and the bullet struck dead center. 5 shots complete. 4 center mass impacts, 1 slightly left. Overall group measuring approximately 18 inches at 1,200 meters. She saved her weapon and stepped back from the line. The hand-loaded ammunition had continued performing without issue. No vertical dispersion indicating velocity variations. The impact spread horizontally based on wind rather than vertically from inconsistent ammunition. The chronograph data from this morning continued translating into downrange accuracy exactly as predicted. Ceasefire, the range officer called. All competitors step back from weapons. Scoring assessment will commence. Holland moved along the firing line, examining fired brass, checking pressure signs, maintaining his safety oversight role. He stopped at Kira's position and inspected several cases. Still running clean, he said. 4 stages complete, and your ammunition is performing like it came from a factory match-grade production line. He paused, then added, better than some factory loads I have tested. The hand-loading technique was solid, Kira replied. Had good training and enough practice to execute properly. Training and practice still require talent to apply correctly under pressure, Holland said. Most shooters who attempted what you did this morning would have produced ammunition that malfunctioned or shot erratically. You produced match-grade consistency in 2 hours. That is exceptional capability regardless of circumstances. Captain Ortega was conducting another conversation near the equipment bay, this time with what appeared to be security personnel and possibly military police. The investigation into the ammunition theft had apparently escalated beyond simple range officer inquiry. Formal proceedings were underway. Chun and Highland had moved to the far edge of the observation area, their positions suggesting they were attempting to become less visible as attention focused on the competition's conclusion. The betting pool they had organized was no longer a source of confidence, and both men showed the body language of people wishing they could be elsewhere. The range officer's voice returned to the speakers. 1,200-meter results are posted. Second 1,200-meter stage will commence from alternate positions in 30 minutes. Kira walked to the scoring board with Walsh and several other competitors. The standings had shifted again. Walsh maintained first place, but his lead had shrunk to a single point. He carried 374 points total. Kira sat at 373, breathing distance from the top position. Rivera had dropped to third at 359. Morrison held fourth at 353. 1 point, Walsh said quietly. He studied the board with professional assessment. 5 stages complete, and we are separated by 1 point. That is as close as this competition has been in the 8 years I have been participating. Still 2 stages remaining, Kira said. 1,400 meters. That is where everything gets tested beyond previous limits. Walsh nodded. 1,400 is a different category of shooting, he said. Flight time pushes 5 seconds. Wind reading becomes exponentially more complex. Mirage at that distance makes target acquisition difficult. And any weakness in ammunition consistency shows up dramatically in vertical dispersion. He looked at her directly. Your hand-loaded ammunition has performed exceptionally well through 5 stages. But 1,400 meters will test it beyond anything we have seen so far. My chronograph data was solid, Kira replied. 2.3 feet per second standard deviation. That should hold even at maximum distance. Should, Walsh repeated. That word keeps appearing in our conversations. He smiled slightly. You have already proven more than anyone expected when you walked onto this range. Whatever happens in the final stages, you have earned respect from every competitor here. Appreciate that, Gunny, Kira said. Rivera and Morrison joined them at the board. 1 point separating first and second, Rivera said. He shook his head slowly. I have competed in this event 4 times. Never seen it this close going into the final stages. Usually someone pulls ahead by 20 or 30 points by now. Lieutenant Vance changed the dynamic, Morrison said. Walsh is shooting at his normal performance level, but instead of separating from the field like usual, he has someone matching him shot for shot. That creates pressure that affects everyone's performance. The observation area had swelled to easily 300 people now. Personnel from across the base had abandoned other duties to witness the conclusion of the competition. The story had spread through official and unofficial channels, growing with each retelling. A SEAL lieutenant overcoming sabotage to compete with handcrafted ammunition, running neck and neck with a two-time champion, proving capabilities that half the base had assumed she did not possess. Holland approached the group at the scoring board. Final two stages are both at 1,400 meters, he said. First stage is standard precision shooting, 10 shots, accuracy assessed. Second stage is tactical shooting under time pressure, 5 shots, must be completed in 4 minutes. He looked at Kira and Walsh. You two are separated by 1 point. That means every shot in the final stages matters. One miss changes everything. Understood, Gunny, both shooters replied simultaneously. The competition had compressed to its essential elements. 2 shooters, 1 point separation, 2 stages remaining at the maximum distance. Everything that had happened this morning, the sabotage, the compressed ammunition development, the chronograph testing, the progressive stages, all of it had led to this moment. A conclusion that would demonstrate whether Kira's hand-loaded ammunition could perform at the most demanding distance, whether her capabilities extended beyond adaptation and determination to include genuine excellence in precision shooting. She returned to lane 7 and began preparing for the alternate position stage at 1,200 meters. The competition continued. The ammunition performed, and the final test approached, where 1,400 meters would separate those who could shoot from those who could shoot exceptionally well under the most challenging conditions competitive marksmanship could provide. The alternate position for the second 1,200-meter stage placed shooters on elevated platforms that added complexity to the already demanding shot. Kira climbed the wooden steps to her assigned platform, her rifle slung across her back, ammunition case in hand. The elevated position changed wind reading calculations, altered the angle of engagement, and required adjustment to shooting fundamentals developed on flat ground. Walsh occupied the platform 2 positions over, his setup methodical and precise. He arranged his equipment with practiced efficiency, but Kira noticed he glanced at the scoring board visible from the elevated positions. 1 point lead. The margin was thin enough that a single superior shot from her or a single error from him would shift the standings. The crowd below had organized itself into distinct groups. Competition supporters clustered near their favored shooters. Range personnel maintained positions that allowed clear observation of all firing platforms. And a substantial contingent of base personnel simply watched with the attention of people witnessing something they had not expected to see. Holland stood at ground level between the platforms, his position allowing him to observe multiple shooters simultaneously. Captain Ortega remained nearby, his clipboard present as always, but his earlier skepticism had transformed into obvious interest in how this competition would conclude. Chun and Highland had moved even further to the periphery of the crowd. 2 military police personnel stood near them, not directly engaging but clearly present. The investigation into the ammunition theft had apparently identified suspects, and consequences were manifesting in real time. Competitors ready, the range officer called. This stage requires 10 shots from elevated positions. Wind conditions at height differ from ground level readings. Adjust your calculations accordingly. You will have 15 minutes to complete your string. Firing line is hot. Commence at your discretion. Kira settled into position on the platform. The elevated angle changed her relationship with the rifle, requiring slight modifications to her body position to maintain consistent cheek weld and sight alignment. She studied the wind flags, noting that conditions at platform height showed different patterns than ground-level indicators suggested. The wind was pushing harder up here, less affected by terrain features that disrupted air movement closer to the ground. She fired her first shot and watched the impact appear high and right of center. The elevation change and increased wind had both affected the bullet's flight. She adjusted her hold, compensating for both factors, and fired the second shot. Center mass. The correction had worked. She continued through her string, each shot informed by the previous impact, her wind reading adapting to the new conditions created by the elevated position. Walsh was firing his own string with characteristic precision. His first 3 shots clustered tightly at center mass, demonstrating his ability to adapt quickly to the changed circumstances. But his 4th shot landed noticeably left of his group, suggesting a wind call error or a momentary lapse in fundamentals. He paused after the 4th shot, taking extra time to reassess before continuing. Rivera struggled more visibly with the elevated position. His shots scattered across a wider area than his previous stages, the combination of height and distance exposing limitations in his ability to adapt to complex conditions. Morrison maintained steadier performance, his military discipline helping him work through the adjustments systematically. Kira completed her 10 shots in 13 minutes. 8 center mass impacts, 2 slightly off-center, but still scoring. Her group measured approximately 20 inches across, larger than her ground-level performance, but respectable given the added complexity. She saved her weapon and watched as other competitors finished their strings. Walsh completed his final shot and stepped back from his platform. His expression showed professional neutrality, but Kira saw tension in his shoulders that had not been present earlier in the competition. The pressure of maintaining his lead was accumulating across stages. "Cease fire," the range officer announced. "Scoring personnel will assess targets. Results will be posted in 10 minutes. Competitors may descend from platforms and prepare for the 1,400-meter stages." Kira descended the steps and moved directly to her equipment area. 2 stages remaining, both at 1,400 meters, the maximum distance this competition tested. The point where ammunition quality, wind reading ability, and fundamental marksmanship skills would face their ultimate examination. Holland met her at ground level. "Solid shooting from elevation," he said. "Most competitors show significant performance degradation from elevated platforms. You adapted quickly." His eyes tracked toward Walsh's platform. "The gunnery sergeant also shot well, but that 4th shot error will cost him points. Depending on how scoring shakes out, you might take the lead after this stage." "Still have 1,400 meters remaining," Kira said. "That is where everything really matters." "True," Holland replied. "But taking the lead going into the final stages changes the psychological dynamic. Walsh has been leading this entire competition. If you overtake him, even by 1 point, that creates pressure he has not experienced today. Champions usually handle pressure well, but everyone has limits." The 10-minute break felt compressed, time moving faster as the competition approached its conclusion. Kira verified her ammunition supply. 60 rounds remaining, more than sufficient for the 2 final stages. She checked her rifle one last time, ensuring everything was properly tightened and aligned. The equipment had performed flawlessly throughout the day. Now it needed to perform flawlessly 2 more times at the most demanding distance. Captain Ortega approached with several other officers Kira recognized from base command staff. "Lieutenant Vance," he said formally, "regardless of final placement, I want you to know that your performance today has been remarkable. The investigation into your ammunition theft has identified the responsible parties. Charges will be filed. But more importantly, you've demonstrated something valuable about capability and determination that this entire base needed to witness." "Thank you, sir," Kira replied. The officers moved away toward the observation area. Their presence indicated that this competition had attracted attention beyond the shooting community, that senior leadership was watching how events concluded. The range officer's voice crackled through the speakers. "Elevated position results are posted. 1,400-meter first stage will commence in 15 minutes. Kira walked to the scoring board with growing crowd of spectators. The standings had shifted exactly as Holland predicted. She had taken a lead. 367 points total, 2 points ahead of Walsh at 365. Rivera remained third at 344. Morrison held fourth at 338. 2 points, Walsh said, appearing beside her. His voice remained steady, but Kira heard the edge beneath the professionalism. I have been leading this competition since the first stage. Now, going into the final 2 stages, I am chasing rather than defending. He looked at her with frank assessment. You have shot exceptionally well today, Lieutenant. Better than I expected anyone to shoot, especially under the circumstances you faced. The final stages will determine whether that performance continues or whether experience and familiarity with maximum distance shooting makes the difference. The ammunition has held through 6 stages, Kira said. No reason to think it will fail now. No technical reason, Walsh agreed. But 1,400 meters is not just technical. It is psychological, knowing that every shot matters, that one miss changes everything, that pressure affects performance in ways that are not always predictable. He paused, then extended his hand. May the best shooter win, Lieutenant. Kira shook his hand. May the best shooter win, Gunny. Rivera and Morrison joined them at the board. You took the lead, Rivera said. There was admiration in his voice. 1 point behind going into the final stages, and you overtook the 2-time champion. That is incredible shooting. Still 2 stages left, Morrison added. 1,400 meters. 5 seconds of bullet flight time. Wind reading that makes everything we have done today look simple by comparison. This competition is far from decided. The crowd had continued growing during the break. Easily 400 people now occupied the observation area, possibly more. The story had apparently spread beyond the base to surrounding military installations. Personnel from other units had arrived, drawn by word of mouth and social media posts about what was happening at the range. 2 military police officers were now speaking with Chun and Highland directly. The conversation appeared official and uncomfortable. Both Marines showed the body language of people answering questions they would prefer not to address. The betting pool they had organized that morning had apparently become evidence in a formal investigation. Kira returned to Lane 7 and began final preparation for the 1,400-meter stages. This was the distance that separated good shooters from exceptional ones. Wind at 1,400 meters became a 3-dimensional puzzle requiring interpretation of data points across the entire flight path. Mirage at that distance made target acquisition challenging even in ideal conditions, and current midday heat had created atmospheric distortion that approached the limits of manageable. But her ammunition had tested true. The chronograph data had proven accurate through 6 progressive stages, and she was leading this competition by 2 points, positioned to potentially win against a 2-time champion and a field of experienced Marine snipers who had started the day expecting her to fail before reaching the firing line. Competitors to the line, the range officer called. 1,400-meter first stage will commence in 10 minutes. This is precision shooting at maximum distance. 10 shots. Each shot will be individually assessed. This stage carries double point value due to difficulty. Double points. Every shot now worth twice as much in the final standings. A single perfect shot could open a significant lead. A single miss could eliminate someone from contention entirely. The mathematics had compressed all the morning's performance into these final 20 shots across 2 stages. Kira settled behind her rifle and acquired the target at 1,400 meters. It appeared impossibly small through the scope, a tiny white rectangle that shimmered and wavered through heat mirage. 5 seconds of flight time from trigger press to impact. Enough time for wind to push the bullet dozens of feet off course if readings were incorrect. Enough distance for small ammunition inconsistencies to manifest as dramatic misses. But she had built this ammunition with her own hands, had tested it through chronograph verification, had proven it across 6 demanding stages. And now, at the maximum distance this competition required, she would discover whether hand-loaded ammunition crafted in 2 hours under impossible pressure could perform one final time when everything depended on its consistency. The 1,400-meter target shimmered at the edge of visibility through the scope. Heat mirage created layers of distortion that made the white rectangle appear to float and dance against the desert background. Kira studied the wind flags positioned at intervals across the range, reading patterns that extended beyond visual confirmation into educated interpretation based on terrain features and atmospheric conditions. "Firing line is hot," the range officer announced. "Double point stage. 10 shots. 20-minute time limit. Precision is paramount. Commence firing at your discretion. 5 seconds from trigger press to impact." Enough time to second-guess the wind call, to wonder if the hold was correct, to question whether the ammunition would perform at this extreme distance. Kira pushed those thoughts aside and focused on fundamentals. Breathing control, sight alignment, trigger press. The mechanics she had executed thousands of times. She fired the first shot and watched through the scope. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. The impact marker appeared 8 inches left of center. The wind had been stronger than her initial read suggested. She adjusted her hold, adding more right-in offset, and prepared the second shot. The trigger broke and the bullet began its journey. 5 seconds of flight through complex wind patterns, through temperature gradients, through atmospheric pressure variations that affected trajectory in subtle but measurable ways. The impact appeared dead center. Perfect correction. In the adjacent lanes, Walsh and Morrison were firing their own strings. Walsh's first shot had struck center mass, his experience with this range showing in his accurate initial wind call. Morrison's first shot landed high and right, requiring significant adjustment for his second attempt. Rivera had withdrawn from the competition after the elevated stage, his performance having dropped him too far back to contend for top positions. He stood in the observation area beside Holland, both men watching the final competitors work through the most demanding stage of the day. Kira fired her third shot. Center mass. Fourth shot. Slightly right, but scoring. Fifth shot. Center mass again. The hand-loaded ammunition was maintaining its consistency even at maximum distance. No vertical dispersion indicating velocity variations. The impact spread based on her wind reading accuracy rather than ammunition quality issues. The crowd behind the firing line had gone completely silent. 400 people watching without conversation, without movement, attention focused entirely on the remaining shooters and the tiny targets at 1,400 meters. This was precision shooting at its most demanding, and everyone present understood they were witnessing something exceptional. Walsh completed his sixth shot and paused, taking extra time to read the wind before continuing. His group was tight, all 6 impacts clustering within a 14-inch circle at center mass. His technique remained flawless, his fundamentals solid despite the pressure of chasing rather than leading. Morrison was experiencing more difficulty. His wind reading showed inconsistency, some shots landing well, while others scattered outside his main group. The extreme distance was exposing small gaps in his environmental interpretation skills. Kira fired her 6th shot. Center mass. 7th shot. Slightly left, caught by an unexpected gust, but still scoring. She adjusted for the increased wind and fired her 8th shot. Dead center. The ammunition continued performing exactly as the chronograph data had predicted. 2.3 feet per second standard deviation was proving sufficient for consistent accuracy, even at 1,400 meters. Walsh fired his 10th and final shot, then saved his weapon and stepped back from the line. His expression showed professional composure, but Kira saw him glance toward the scoring area with more intensity than earlier stages had demanded. The 2-point deficit meant he needed either flawless performance or errors from her to reclaim the lead. Kira fired her 9th shot. Center mass. 1 shot remaining. She took her time, reading the wind carefully, checking her elevation setting, ensuring every detail was correct. The final shot of this stage carried enormous weight. Perfect execution would likely extend her lead. An error could narrow it or eliminate it entirely. She controlled her breathing, settled deeper into her position, focused through the mirage to find the clearest sight picture possible. The crosshairs steadied on the target. She pressed the trigger smoothly, consistently, exactly as she had done thousands of times before. The shot broke clean. 5 seconds of flight. The impact marker appeared at dead center of the target. 10 shots complete. 8 center mass, 2 slightly off-center, but scoring. Her group measured approximately 16 inches at 1,400 meters. Exceptional accuracy, given the distance and conditions. She safed her weapon and stood, feeling the accumulated fatigue from 8 hours of sustained precision shooting begin pressing against her awareness. But one stage remained. The tactical stage. 5 shots under time pressure. 4 minutes to complete all 5 shots, including target acquisition and position adjustment. Ceasefire, the range officer called. Scoring personnel downrange. Results will be posted in 15 minutes. Final stage will commence immediately after results posting. Holland approached the firing line, moving directly to Kira's position. That was exceptional shooting, he said. His voice carried professional respect that went beyond courtesy. 16-inch group at 1,400 meters with hand-loaded ammunition. I have seen factory match loads produce worse results at that distance. He glanced toward Walsh's lane. The gunnery sergeant also shot well, but your group was slightly tighter. Depending on scoring methodology, you likely extended your lead. One stage remaining, Kira said. Anything can happen in tactical shooting under time pressure. True, Holland replied. But you have already proven everything that needed proving today. Whether you win or place second, you demonstrated capability that silenced every skeptic who thought sabotage would eliminate you from competition. He paused, then added, most of those skeptics are now trying to figure out how they got their assessments so wrong. Captain Ortega was engaged in what appeared to be a formal conversation with the military police officers in Shun and Highland. The 2 Marines who had organized the betting pool and presumably been involved in the ammunition theft were being escorted away from the observation area. Formal charges were apparently being filed, consequences manifesting for actions taken that morning. The crowd remained largely silent during the scoring period. The competition had compressed to its essential elements. 2 shooters separated by small margins. 1 stage remaining. Outcome uncertain. The story that had begun with sabotage and skepticism was approaching its conclusion, and no one present wanted to miss witnessing how it ended. Morrison completed his 10th shot and stepped back from the line. His performance at 1,400 meters had been respectable, but not competitive with the top 2 shooters. He would finish in a solid position, but out of contention for first or second place. Walsh stood near his lane, not approaching the scoring board early, maintaining the professional composure that had served him throughout his career. But Kira saw him checking his watch repeatedly, saw the slight tension in his jaw, the small physical tells that indicated pressure accumulating beneath the calm exterior. Rivera approached Kira at her lane. That was beautiful shooting, he said. There was genuine admiration in his voice. I have been competing in precision shooting for 6 years. Never seen anyone perform at that level with ammunition they loaded the same morning of competition. Whatever happens in the final stage, you have already accomplished something remarkable. Appreciate that, Sergeant, Kira replied. The range officer's voice returned to the speakers. 1,400-meter precision stage results are posted. Final stage, tactical shooting under time pressure, will commence in 10 minutes. Competitors prepare for rapid engagement protocols. Kira walked to the scoring board with Walsh and Morrison. The standings had shifted again. She had extended her lead to 5 points. 387 total compared to Walsh's 382. Morrison had dropped to third at 358. 5 points, Walsh said quietly. He studied the board with professional assessment. That is a significant lead going into the final stage. Not insurmountable, but requiring near-perfect performance from me and at least 1 error from you. Tactical stage is unpredictable, Kira said. Time pressure changes everything. True, Walsh agreed. But you have been operating under extreme time pressure since 0600 this morning. Was 4 more minutes of pressure compared to what you have already navigated. He looked at her directly. You're going to win this competition, Lieutenant. I can see it now. The question is not whether you will win, but by how much. Competition is not finished until the final shot is scored, Kira replied. Accurate statement, Walsh said. But sometimes you can feel when someone is operating at a level that is going to be difficult to match. You're operating at that level today. He extended his hand again. It has been an honor competing against you. They shook hands, the gesture carrying weight beyond normal sportsmanship. This was acknowledgement from a two-time champion that he had faced an opponent who had exceeded his capabilities on this particular day under these particular circumstances. Holland gathered the remaining competitors near the main firing line. Final stage is tactical engagement, he announced. You will have 4 minutes to fire 5 shots at 1,400 meters. You must change positions after each shot. Time pressure is intense. This stage tests your ability to perform under stress while maintaining accuracy at maximum distance. He paused, looking at each shooter. This is where competitions are won or lost. Good luck to all competitors. Kira returned to lane 7 for the final time. 5 shots. For minutes. Position changes required. Maximum distance. And a 5-point lead that could evaporate with a single mistake or hold firm with solid execution. The hand-loaded ammunition had performed flawlessly through 7 stages. Now it needed to perform one final time under the most demanding conditions the competition could create. The crowd had swelled to capacity. Every available viewing position was occupied. Personnel stood on equipment crates, climbed observation towers, found any vantage point that offered a view of the firing line. This was the conclusion everyone had been waiting for. The final answer to whether capability could completely overcome sabotage, whether hand-loaded ammunition could win against factory match loads, whether a SEAL lieutenant could defeat a 2-time Marine champion on his home range. Competitors to the line, the range officer called. Final stage. Tactical engagement. You will have 4 minutes, starting on my mark. Firing line is hot. Begin. The clock started. For minutes. 5 shots. 1,400 meters. Everything that had happened since 0600 this morning compressed into 240 seconds of precision shooting under maximum pressure. For minutes on the clock, Kira settled into the first shooting position and acquired the target at 1,400 meters. No time for extended wind, reading, or careful calculation. Tactical shooting required rapid assessment, quick execution, immediate transition. She pressed the trigger and watched the impact appear slightly left of center. Scoring hit. She grabbed her rifle and moved to the second position 30 feet away. Walsh was firing from his own sequence of positions, his movements efficient and practiced. His first shot struck center mass. His transition to the second position showed the fluid economy of someone who had run tactical stages hundreds of times. But Kira saw him check the clock, saw the small hesitation that indicated awareness of the 5-point deficit and the limited time remaining to close it. Kira settled into position 2 and fired within 15 seconds of arriving. Center mass impact. She cycled the bolt, confirmed the hit through her scope, and immediately began moving to position 3. 3 shots remaining. 2 minutes and 40 seconds left on the clock. Morrison was struggling with the time pressure. His transitions between positions were slower than optimal. His shooting rushed enough to affect accuracy. His second shot missed the scoring zone entirely, a costly error that would eliminate him from any chance of advancing in the standings. Position 3 offered a different angle to the target, requiring Kira to adjust her wind hold based on the changed relationship to prevailing conditions. She made the calculation in seconds rather than minutes, trusting her experience and training to provide accurate estimation under pressure. The trigger broke, and the bullet struck 2 inches right of center. Still scoring. 2 shots remaining. Walsh completed his third shot and transitioned to position 4. His shooting remained precise, but not perfect. 2 of his 3 shots had struck center mass, one landing slightly high. He was shooting well, but not well enough to overcome a 5-point deficit unless Kira made significant errors in her remaining shots. Kira reached position 4 with 90 seconds remaining. She settled quickly, controlled her breathing despite the physical exertion of rapid movement, and acquired the target. The shot broke clean. Center mass. 1 shot remaining. One position left. The crowd behind the firing line pressed forward, bodies straining against the safety barriers to get the best possible view of the final moments. Holland stood at the front of the observation area, his arms crossed, his weathered face showing professional satisfaction. Captain Ortega watched with his clipboard forgotten at his side, attention entirely focused on the conclusion unfolding before him. Kira moved to the fifth and final position. 60 seconds remaining. Walsh fired his fourth shot from his own final position, the impact striking center mass. His technique had been flawless under pressure, demonstrating exactly why he had won this competition twice before. But flawless was not enough when starting 5 points behind against an opponent who was also shooting flawlessly. Kira settled into the final position. 45 seconds remained on the clock. She had time to execute properly rather than rushing. The target appeared through her scope, shimmering through mirage, distant and small, but familiar after 8 stages of shooting at various ranges. She read the wind one final time, made her hold adjustment, controlled her breathing. The trigger broke. The bullet began its 5-second flight. The crowd had gone absolutely silent, 400 people holding collective breath as the final shot traveled downrange. The impact marker appeared, dead center of the target. Perfect final shot. She safed her rifle and stepped back from the position. 28 seconds remained on the clock, but all 5 shots were complete. 5 for 5 scoring hits. For center mass, 1 slightly right. Tactical stage, complete with time to spare. Walsh fired his final shot with 15 seconds remaining. Center mass impact. He had also shot 5 for 5, his performance matching hers in execution. But the 5-point lead she had carried into the stage meant his perfect shooting had only closed the gap, not eliminated it. Time expired. The range officer's voice came through the speakers. Ceasefire. All shooting complete. Final scoring assessment will take 15 minutes. All competitors have completed the Western Division Sniper competition. The silence broke into conversation and movement as the crowd began processing what they had witnessed. 8 stages complete. Maximum distance tested. Time pressure applied. And the SEAL lieutenant who had started the morning with her ammunition stolen and her participation in doubt had shot through every stage without significant error. Holland moved directly to Kira's position. That was championship-level shooting, he said. His voice carried certainty rather than speculation. 5 for 5 in the tactical stage. Perfect execution under time pressure at 1,400 meters. Combined with your performance across all previous stages, you just won this competition. He extended his hand. Congratulations, Lieutenant. Scoring is not complete, Kira said, shaking his hand. Anything could happen in assessment. Nothing is going to happen that changes the outcome, Holland replied. The mathematics are clear. You entered the final stage with a 5-point lead. Both you and Gunnery Sergeant Walsh shot perfectly in the tactical stage. That means the lead holds. You are the Western Division champion. Walsh approached, his rifle slung across his back. Holland is correct, he said. The math is definitive. You won. His expression showed genuine respect rather than disappointment. I have competed in this event 8 times. Won it twice. Never faced an opponent who pushed me this hard across every stage. You shot exceptionally well today, Lieutenant. Better than exceptionally. You shot at a level that few competitors ever reach. Thank you, Gunny, Kira replied. You shot incredibly well, too. This could have gone either way. No, Walsh said. It cannot have gone either way. You were the better shooter today. The circumstances you overcame, the pressure you operated under, the consistency you maintained across 8 stages with ammunition you built this morning, that performance exceeded anything I could have produced under similar conditions. He paused, then added, the Marines who sabotaged your ammunition thought they were eliminating competition. Instead, they created circumstances that showcase capabilities they should have respected from the beginning. Rivera and Morrison joined the group. That was beautiful shooting, Rivera said. Both of you. Watching that tactical stage was watching precision marksmanship at its finest. Perfect execution under maximum pressure. Morrison nodded agreement. Lieutenant Vance, he said, I examined your ammunition this morning when you were loading it. I told you then that it was quality work. But watching it perform across 8 stages at distances up to 1,400 meters, that exceeded my assessment. You did not just produce functional ammunition. You produced match-grade consistency that rivaled factory loads that take months to develop. Had good training, Kira said, and enough practice to execute under pressure. Training and practice still require talent, Morrison replied. What you demonstrated today was talent applied at the highest level. Captain Ortega approached with several base command officers. Lieutenant Vance, he said formally, preliminary scoring indicates you have won the Western Division sniper competition. Final results will be posted shortly, but I wanted to personally congratulate you on an exceptional performance. He paused, his expression showing something close to contrition. I offered you multiple opportunities to withdraw this morning because I genuinely believed your participation under the circumstances was not feasible. I was comprehensively wrong. You proved capabilities that exceeded my assumptions and demonstrated determination that should serve as example for every competitor on this base. Thank you, sir, Kira replied. The investigation into your ammunition theft has identified the responsible parties, Ortega continued. Charges have been filed. Formal disciplinary action will proceed through appropriate channels. But beyond the administrative response, I want you to know that this incident and your response to it have initiated discussions about culture and assumptions within our sniper training programs. Changes are coming because of what happened here today. The range officer's voice returned to the speakers. Final competition results are posted. All competitors and spectators may review standings at the main scoring board. The crowd moved as a collective unit toward the scoring area. Kira walked with Walsh and the other top competitors, aware of the press of bodies around them. The attention focused on the conclusion of the competition. The scoring board showed final results in clear numerical precision. First place, Lieutenant Kira Vance, United States Navy SEAL, for 107 points. Second place, Gunnery Sergeant Derek Walsh, United States Marine Corps, 402 points. Third place, Staff Sergeant James Morrison, United States Army, 378 points. 5-point victory margin. 8 stages complete. 0 malfunctions. Consistent accuracy from 600 to 1,400 meters. Hand-loaded ammunition performing at championship level. In a story that had begun with sabotage and skepticism, concluding with victory and earned respect. The crowd erupted in applause. Not polite recognition, but genuine acknowledgement of exceptional performance witnessed in real time. For 100 people who had gathered to watch what many expected to be a failure, instead witnessed something else entirely. Capability overcoming adversity. Determination translating into results. And proof that assumptions about what was possible sometimes needed comprehensive revision. Holland stood beside the scoring board, his arms still crossed, his expression showing satisfaction that went beyond simple pleasure at witnessing good shooting. That, he said to no one in particular, and everyone listening, is what happens when skill meets preparation meets refusal to accept limitations others try to impose. He looked directly at Kira. Today you changed minds, Lieutenant. Not just about your capabilities, but about assumptions this community has been carrying for too long. That matters more than the trophy. Walsh extended his hand one final time. Champion, he said simply. The word carried weight and acknowledgement and respect. Well earned. Kira shook his hand, feeling the accumulated fatigue from the entire day pressing against her awareness, now that the competition had concluded. 8 hours from discovering her ammunition stolen to standing at the top of the competition standings. 200 rounds of hand-loaded ammunition built in compressed timeline and tested across 8 demanding stages. 400 witnesses to a performance that had exceeded every prediction made that morning. The trophy presentation would come later. The formal recognition and ceremony and official documentation. But in this moment, standing at the scoring board with competitors who had pushed her and challenged her and ultimately respected her, Kira understood that the real victory had already occurred, not in the points or the placement, but in the proof that capability mattered more than sabotage, that determination could overcome institutional doubt, and that sometimes the best response to people betting on your failure was simply to perform at a level that made all their predictions irrelevant. The trophy presentation took place 30 minutes after final scoring, giving competitors time to clean equipment and the range staff time to organize the ceremony. A makeshift platform had been erected near the main firing line, flags positioned behind it, the Western Division sniper competition banner displayed prominently. The crowd had reorganized itself into a semicircle facing the platform. 400 people, now joined by media personnel who had arrived after word spread beyond the base about what had transpired. Kira stood to the side of the platform with Walsh and Morrison, the top 3 finishers awaiting the formal ceremony. Her rifle was cleaned and cased, her equipment organized, but she still wore the same shooting clothes from this morning. 8 hours of competition had left their mark in dust and powder residue and the physical evidence of sustained performance under pressure. Base Commander Colonel Hartley approached the platform, his uniform crisp despite the afternoon heat. He carried a leather folder containing what Kira assumed were prepared remarks about the competition. But when he reached the microphone, he set the folder aside and spoke without notes. This competition began this morning under circumstances that none of us anticipated, he said. His voice carried clearly across the assembled crowd. An act of sabotage that should have eliminated a competitor instead became the catalyst for one of the most remarkable demonstrations of skill, determination, and professionalism I have witnessed in 28 years of military service. The crowd remained silent, attention focused entirely on the colonel's words. Lieutenant Kira Vance arrived at this range facility at 0600 to discover that her competition ammunition had been stolen. Hartley continued. 200 rounds of carefully prepared, match-grade ammunition gone. Most competitors would have withdrawn. Many would have been justified in demanding postponement or filing formal complaints before considering continuation. Lieutenant Vance made a different choice. She requested access to a ballistics workshop and spent the next 2 hours hand-loading 200 rounds of precision ammunition from raw components. Hartley paused, letting the timeline sink in for those in the crowd who might not have witnessed the morning's events. That ammunition, built in 2 hours under extreme time pressure, was then tested for safety and consistency. Master Gunnery Sergeant Holland, who has overseen ammunition testing at this facility for over 3 decades, declared it the most consistent hand-loaded ammunition he had ever evaluated. Lieutenant Vance then proceeded to compete across 8 stages, from 600 to 1,400 meters, under conditions ranging from standard precision to tactical shooting under time pressure. Her performance was flawless. She won this competition by 5 points over a 2-time champion, shooting ammunition she had built the same morning. The crowd erupted in applause. Hartley waited for it to subside before continuing. But this story is about more than just winning a competition, he said. His tone became more serious. This morning's sabotage has been investigated. The responsible parties have been identified and will face appropriate disciplinary action. But beyond the individual accountability, this incident has revealed cultural issues within our training programs that require institutional response. Assumptions about capability based on gender rather than demonstrated performance. Tolerance for unprofessional behavior that created an environment where sabotage seemed acceptable. These issues will be addressed comprehensively. Holland stood near the platform, his arms crossed, his expression showing approval of the colonel's direct approach to the underlying problems. This competition should serve as a reminder to every person on this base, Hartley continued. Capability is demonstrated through performance, not assumptions. Respect is earned through professionalism and skill, not granted based on demographic categories. And when someone faces adversity, their response reveals more about their character than any amount of favorable circumstances ever could. The colonel gestured toward the platform. Lieutenant Vance, Gunnery Sergeant Walsh, Staff Sergeant Morrison, please join me for the awards presentation. Kira climbed the steps with Walsh and Morrison. The 3 stood at attention as Hartley presented 3rd place recognition to Morrison, 2nd place to Walsh. Each received their trophy and formal certificate, Each was acknowledged by genuine applause from the assembled crowd. Then Hartley turned to Kira. "Lieutenant Kira Vance," he said formally. "Western Division Sniper Competition Champion. 407 points. 8 stages without malfunction. Precision shooting at championship level across all distances." He presented the trophy, a substantial piece that depicted a sniper in prone position. And more importantly, he added a demonstration of capability and character that changed minds and challenged assumptions across this entire facility. Kira accepted the trophy, feeling its weight in her hands. "Thank you, sir," she said. Hartley shook her hand, then stepped back and initiated the applause that spread through the entire crowd. 400 people acknowledging not just victory, but the circumstances that made the victory meaningful. As the applause continued, Kira saw faces in the crowd that had worn skepticism this morning now showing respect. Rivera stood near the front, applauding enthusiastically. Kimball, whose technical doubts about hand-loaded ammunition had been comprehensive, was clapping with obvious sincerity. Even the younger Marines who had gathered to watch expected failure were now witnessing success and processing what that meant for their own assumptions. Chun and Highland were notably absent, presumably dealing with the consequences of their actions in locations less public than this ceremony. But their absence somehow made the moment more complete. The sabotage had failed. The predictions of failure had proven wrong. And the community was adjusting to new reality where capability mattered more than comfortable assumptions. The ceremony concluded and the crowd began dispersing. But many people approached Kira directly, offering congratulations and acknowledgement. Walsh was among the first. "You changed something today," he said. "Not just winning the competition, but how you won it, turning sabotage into opportunity, maintaining composure under pressure that would have broken most competitors, shooting at championship level with every excuse available to perform below that standard." He paused, then added, "I hope you compete again next year. I would welcome the challenge of trying to beat you under normal circumstances." "Appreciate that, Gunny," Kira replied. "It was an honor competing against you." Holland approached with Captain Ortega. The master gunnery sergeant carried a small box that he presented to Kira. "Your test ammunition cases," he said. "The 20 rounds you fired through the chronograph this morning. I pulled them from the brass pile and saved them. Figured you might want physical reminder of what you accomplished today." Kira accepted the box. "Thank you, Gunny. That means a lot." "Those cases represent something important," Holland said. "Proof that exceptional work can be accomplished in compressed timelines when skill meets preparation meets determination. I'm going to tell that story to every young shooter who comes through this facility. Use it as example of what is possible when you refuse to accept limitations others try to impose." Morrison and Rivera joined the group. "Your ammunition performance today was extraordinary," Morrison said. "I would like to request your permission to reference your load data in an article I am writing for the Precision Shooting Journal. Obviously with full attribution and your approval." "Of course," Kira replied. "Happy to share the information." The crowd continued thinning as people returned to normal duties. The spectacle concluded, the story complete. But Kira noticed small groups remaining, engaged in animated conversations that appeared to be processing what they had witnessed. Culture change did not happen instantly, but moments like this created inflection points where old assumptions became harder to maintain. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know your favorite part or character. Maybe you have witnessed similar situations where someone overcame sabotage to prove their capability. Maybe you know someone who refused to accept the limitations others tried to impose. Share your thoughts and let us know if stories like this resonate with your own experiences. As afternoon progressed toward evening, Kira packed her equipment and prepared to leave the range facility. The trophy sat in its case beside her rifle, physical representation of the day's achievement. But the real victory was not contained in the trophy or the scoring results. It was in the changed expressions, the transformed assumptions, the respect earned through performance rather than granted through accommodation. Walsh appeared one final time as she prepared to depart. "I meant what I said earlier. he told her. "You are welcome at this range anytime. For training, for competition, for sharing expertise with our shooting programs. The door is open. Always." "Thank you, Gunny," Kira said. "I might take you up on that." She drove away from the facility as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of copper and gold identical to the light she had seen this morning when walking from the equipment bay to the ballistics workshop. 12 hours had passed since discovering her ammunition stolen. 12 hours that had compressed years of training and experience into a single continuous demonstration of capability under adversity. The base radio was playing as she drove, some country song about persistence and proving doubters wrong. The lyrics felt almost too appropriate for the day's events. She smiled slightly and kept driving, the trophy secure in the passenger seat, the memory of perfect shots at impossible distances still vivid in her awareness. Tomorrow the story would spread further. Media coverage would amplify what had happened. Discussions about culture and assumptions in military training programs would continue. Formal proceedings against Chun and Highland would move forward. But tonight, Kira simply drove back to her quarters with the satisfaction of knowing she had faced sabotage designed to eliminate her from competition and had responded by winning the entire event with ammunition she had built in a workshop while skeptics watched and predicted failure. The hand-loaded ammunition had performed flawlessly. The chronograph data had proven accurate. The capabilities she had developed through years of training and deployment had translated into championship-level performance when circumstances demanded excellence. And somewhere on that base, assumptions about what was possible were being revised by people who had witnessed proof that determination combined with skill could overcome obstacles designed to be insurmountable. The competition was over. The victory was complete. And the real work of changing culture would continue long after the trophy presentation and the applause and the moment of public recognition had faded into routine. But moments like this mattered because they provided proof that change was necessary and achievable, that old assumptions deserve challenge, and that sometimes the best response to sabotage was simply to perform at a level that made every prediction of failure look ridiculous in retrospect. Kira pulled into her parking space as the sun touched the horizon. She gathered her equipment, secured the trophy, and headed inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and different circumstances. But tonight, she had proven something worth proving, not just to the skeptics and the saboteurs and the institutional doubt, but to herself. That capability mattered. That preparation paid dividends. And that the right response to people betting on your failure was to win so convincingly that they would never make that bet again.